Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Stacy and everybody here at On the Path. And thank you, Candida. All right, if everybody wants to just help me out here for a minute and stand up, we're going to hold our hands like so right up front. Okay, what we're going to do now is kind of move out and back around like so. This is called Open the Heavenly Gate. It's a very simple little Qigong exercise just to make sure that everybody's in the right frame of mind here. I don't want to feel anybody's bad vibes. Very nice. Okay. This time we'll just hold the hands about like so in front of ourselves. And both hands just gently move out to the side like so and back. And it's called smoothing the path of life. Okay, we'll do one more. We'll do the left hand under the right. We begin bringing the left hand toward our body and just kind of weaving. And that's called weaving the web of universal protection. Beautifully done. Very nice. Okay, give yourselves a little round of applause. It's always nice to start off with those. Those are exercises that I learned from Master Hua Ching Ni a number of years ago. And those were exercises that we were taught. Kind of interesting how we learned those. We spent several days working with him, and he was about 98 years old at the time, and he's still teaching. But toward the end of his presentations and his teaching, he got up and he put his trench coat on and he put his Frank Sinatra hat on and he just kind of took off, left the room, just left. And everybody said, well, we must be done. So they wrapped up all the cameras, they wrapped up all of the tape recorders, and everybody that was accounting the evening sort of left. And then 15 minutes later, there were about 5 of us still in the room, and he came charging back in. He said, we're not done yet. And he took his hat and coat off. And there were only about 5 of us in there. And for posterity, he said, everybody sit down. He said, there's 16 different Qigong exercises that have been in my family for 3,400 years. We've never taught them outside the family. Today it's time. So you just learned 3 of those. And those are very special exercises. I had a woman one time who said, I taught her weaving the web, and I taught her, weaving the web is an exercise that was designed to expand the pericardium. In Chinese medicine and spiritual terms, the pericardium is sort of like your protection between you and the world. And that when you get stressed out, this sort of like little energy field shrinks, and as you build up your resistance and your expansion takes place and you have your protection, sort of like those bug lights, I say it's sort of like your natural protection that is very similar to those bug lamps. And the idea that you can expand it through this exercise, Master Ni used to say that it should be about 36 inches outside, protecting your heart, protecting your emotions, protecting your spirit. But the way we live nowadays, things get worn down pretty readily. So with stress, that shrinks right up on you. And when that shrinks up is when you feel anxious, when you feel nervous. So he said one of the most important things to do is to do the weaving of the web, expand that protection. You'll feel it instantly. So I told a woman one day in my office about that exercise. She said, you never know. She said, maybe one of those days I'll need that exercise. So I saw her probably several months later, and she said, I was having a custody battle in court. And she said, as I was in the middle of our custody battle in court, she said, I ran into the ladies' room, and I thought I was going to die. I was really, really stressed out. And I've never been that stressed in my life. And she said, I don't have any medication. I don't have anything. I don't know what to do. Wait, I remember that little exercise. So she did it in the ladies' room, and she said it saved her life. She came out of the ladies' room in court that day and said she remembered the exercise and was very thankful that she had it because it was all she had. So there are 3 major themes that we're going to address tonight. There are 3 important themes that I wanted to talk about. And the first theme is very simply, healing is your choice. I said doctoring is about the way some deal with symptoms. Healing is the way you live. So most of us think in terms of healing as something that we seek out when we're sick, when we're not feeling well, when we're depressed, when we're anxious. and when life is sort of using us up. But I like to think of healing as being something that you need to equate in very different terms. It's a process of cultivating consciousness. It's a process of growing the healing awareness. But the single most important thing to keep in mind is that you're the healer, and the potentiation of your healing process is a choice. But in the culture that we live in, we don't often hear about it in those terms because it's not very cost-effective to live life that way. So we live in a culture that more or less programs us to seek the substantial upliftment, the medication, the healing from other, not from self. There's a profound disempowerment process that takes place in the manner in which we live. And most of us don't really think about it that way. Most of us think that we have to give in to the professionalism, to the training of someone other than ourselves. And it's extremely important that we own the responsibility and that we seize the responsibility to be our own healer within and to be our own doctors. So I say healing is something that each one of us has a birthright to, and it's a question of whether or not we're living in the context of wholeness, because I don't think it's possible to be well without healing, and it's not possible to heal without wholeness. So what ends up happening is we're born with the essence of healing. We're born with a sense of perfection in a way that becomes diminished as time goes on. And I think it's really important that we understand that as we live on in life, we don't have to feel depleted. We don't have to feel used up by life. In many respects, I've come to see it as a choice. And I think it's a choice that we all have to realize that we have the power to make. That's the single most important message. That we're programmed to seek from other when in fact it's self where wholeness resides. And again, I think the idea of wholeness has to speak to the nature of all parts of self. And most of us in this culture don't really have an awful lot of opportunities to exercise spirit, except for maybe 45 to 50 minutes on a Sunday. And most of us are unaware of the fact that spirit is always active, consciousness is always active, it never stops. Consciousness never takes vacations. Consciousness is the essence. It's the observer within your eyes. It's behind your personality. It's within yourself. It's the rudiment of who you are. We can, we use the term, he lost consciousness, she lost consciousness. We talk about accidents and traumas. And that tells a lot about the reference that we come from. Nobody loses consciousness. You can't lose consciousness. You can lose the application of your thought. You can use the application of the locality of the brain. But you can't lose consciousness. Consciousness is essence, and it simply manifests from form to form. When you're sleeping, you're conscious. When you think that you're basically shut down, depleted, drained, you're still conscious. You're observing all that process that you're going through. There's always that grounded, complete part of who you are, that whole part of who you are, that nucleic part of who you are, the truth, the essence of who you are is always there. But because of the rate of distraction and because of the programming of the kind of living and the inculcation that we're experiencing in this particular cultural experiment that we're all living through right now, consciousness is something that has to be re-attained because we're committed to distraction from consciousness, which sort of takes the wholeness equation and splits it up. And when you're living in that arbitrary place of thought, you can think of yourself in many different ways, quantitatively, especially in this culture. I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm too stupid, I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. And it sort of avails how we really break down the wholeness of self. And with so much of that taking place in a culture that's programmed to really think in those terms, and when collective consciousness is as collective as it is, we're really strengthening and fortifying and breeding a sense of negativity that takes us further away from the equation of healing. and a lot closer to the equation of disease. So the essence of healing has to really first embrace the essence of wholeness. And for each one of us to begin thinking in terms of self in less self-condemning terms, I guess I'd say. I think we're sort of programmed to think that, especially in this day and age, that we're just simply not enough. So the first message really and truly is that everybody has the ability to heal. Everybody has the ability to take the healer within, expand upon that consciousness, and to really become the healing influence in their lives and in the lives of all those people that they touch. So I say healing is essentially something that we make choices about every day. Whether we're conscious of it or not is a different story. We talk about nutrition. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about food as a means of implementing a conscious decision to heal. When you think about food in America nowadays, I think healing and food are perhaps starting to get a little closer with each other, but they couldn't be much further apart if they tried. So when we think about healing as a choice, how do we implement that choice? How do we empower ourselves in a viable fashion to really make a difference? Well, first of all, you have to dare to, because you've been marketed to in a way to believe that food is anything but medicine. You've been led to believe that food is essentially nothing but a feel-good substance, when in fact it's the first and the most primary medicine that's available to you. It's always been that way. So one of the things I wanted to share with you tonight is a little bit of sort of, I guess I'd say, disappointing information regarding the food is medicine choice. Many people have heard me with some of these statistics before, but the average annual consumption of low nutrient foods in America right now per person, 756 donuts per year, 60 pounds of cakes and cookies per year per person, 23 gallons of ice cream, 7 pounds of potato chips, 22 pounds of candy, 200 sticks of gum, 365 servings of soft drink, 90 pounds of saturated fat, and 134 pounds of refined sugar. According to data collected by the United States Department of Agriculture from over 11,000 Americans, it showed that on any given day, 41% didn't have any fruit at all, 82% had no cruciferous green vegetables, 72% did not eat enough vitamin C-rich foods, 80% did not eat enough vitamin A-rich foods, 84% didn't eat enough fiber in their foods. And the most popular grocery items in America, number 1, Marlboro cigarettes. Number 2, Coca-Cola Classic. And by the way, if you see me at the grocery store, I'm not looking in your carriage. Just keep wheeling right by. And I don't care if you pretend you don't see me. That's perfectly okay. Number 3 would be Pepsi Cola. Number 4 would be Kraft processed cheese. Number 5 would be Diet Coke. Number 6 would be Campbell's Soup. Number 7, Budweiser. Number 8, Tide detergent. Probably safer dietarily than most of the things on the list. Number 9, Folgers coffee. And number 10, Winston cigarettes. Those are the top 10 foods, grocery foods in America nowadays. Yet, when I say that healing is a choice, that shows that there are an awful lot of people that are choosing not to heal. And there are a variety of reasons for that, obviously. But I think the most disappointing thing of all is the first thing that comes to my mind when somebody comes in my office and they have cancer, they have terminal illness, the first thing that comes to my mind is here's another person that I have a responsibility to educate and inspire. Because there is no real true education and there is very little inspiration out there regarding food as medicine. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And the truth is that a 2-time Nobel Prize winner by the name of Warburg, Dr. Otto Warburg, won 2 Nobel Prizes for cell physiology. And in those 2 Nobel Prize research efforts, he tells us that if you just take cancer, for example, that cancer thrives, requires fermentation in sugar for growth. Requires it. So a 2-time Nobel Prize winner is telling us that the primary cause of cancer is dysbiosis, or the breakdown of oxygen as a result of fermentation in sugar. Now, fermentation competes with oxygen, so you can't have it both ways biochemically. Look, immunity is very fragile. The key really here is you have to really think in terms of oxygenating and alkalizing your cells. Every tenth of a point of potential hydrogen or pH is equal to 64% oxygen differential. Every tenth of a point is a potential for life and death. Every tenth of a point. So when you buy the little urine strips down at the health food store and you check your first morning's urine and your urine is between 5.0 and 6.3, you are a good host for cancer. There's plenty of fermentation, there's plenty of acidosis, very little oxygen, and quite frankly, you're whistling down the tracks. It may not happen today, but trust me, you're being surveyed as a host site. Okay? So the idea that we're not being taught this information, and again, what kind of viable information is this? Again, you can look at it yourself, a two-time Nobel Prize winner. So as far as medical science telling us, look, give me some hard, double-blind scientific information. Well, there's a two-time Nobel Prize winner, all right, who's telling us very specifically that if you want to neutralize or overcome negative odds for cancer probabilities, you want to certainly make sure that you alkalize yourself. Well, what kind of foods alkalize us? Obviously, fruits and vegetables alkalize us, water alkalizes us, fresh air alkalizes us, sleep alkalizes us. Everything that we would imagine as being really important for our immune system is indeed important for our immune system. So when I think in terms of people not getting that information, to me it feels like they're being deprived of potentially life-saving information. You know, there is indeed a pharmaceutical bias. If you think there's not, you're sadly mistaken. And to me, the really important aspect of all this is, again, you have the choice. University of Arizona recently published a study which reported that there are 130,000 accidental deaths annually due to medical error from pharmaceutical side effects. It's referred to as iatrogenesis. It's the 8th leading cause of death in America. Yet, we live, in a sense, without the awareness that we have the power to make a difference. And then when we're desperate, we run off to people that are killing 130,000 people a year. We've heard a lot about Vioxx recently. A leading arthritis and pain medication was recently withdrawn from the market after it was shown to have caused thousands of heart attacks, estimated 55,000 deaths from Vioxx. Of the $400 billion in worldwide pharmaceutical drug sales, America spends $200 billion. So presently, we're racking up 1/2 of the global pharmaceutical bill in this country. From 1980 to 2000, prescription drugs tripled as a percentage of U.S. gross domestic product. During that same time, the combined profits of the 10 drug companies listed in Fortune 500 totaled $39 billion. That's $2 billion more than the profits of all the other 490 businesses in America combined, corporate businesses combined. So the idea to me isn't just that pharmaceuticals are bad. That's not the point. The point is you and I are not getting the job done at our end. I guess you could say, start off by saying that we're not being properly educated about and inspired with regards to what our power and what the potential is. But these pharmaceutical problems that we're talking about lead to 116 million additional physician visits a year, 77 million extra prescriptions a year, 17 million emergency room visits per year, 8 million hospitalizations, 3 million long-term admissions, $77 billion in extra costs. And this is really an important thing to hear. According to the World Report 2000, of the 13 industrial nations evaluated on the basis of 16 available health indicators, combined health care in America ranked 12th among the 13 industrial nations. So we're all programmed to believe that we have the finest healthcare system in the world. We don't. According to the World Health Organization, we're 12th out of 13. And just to give you some of the ratings from the World Health Organization, we've been rated 13th for potential life lost, 10th for age-adjusted mortality, 10th for life expectancy at 40 years for females, 9th for life expectancy at 40 years for males, 13th for neonatal mortality, 11th for postnatal mortality, 11th for life expectancy at 1 year for females, 12th for life expectancy at 1 year for males. Anyway, on it goes. Yes, John Hopkins School of Hygiene, Dr. Barbara Starfield has done a great deal of information compiling regarding this business as well. And Dr. Barbara Starfield goes on. She published some annual iatrogenic statistics. 12,000 deaths from unnecessary surgeries, 7,000 deaths from medication errors in hospitals, 20,000 deaths from miscellaneous errors, 80,000 deaths from infections, 106,000 deaths from negative reactions to drugs, and according to the American Medical Association, 250,000 total deaths per year. So when we think in terms of what are the options to what I suggested earlier, that healing is our choice, those are the options. Okay? So when we think in terms of really what our choices are, I think in terms of the Senate subcommittee report. George McGovern headed the first Senate subcommittee report back in 1976. The McGovern Committee report was really a remarkable study of the dietary standards, if there really were any back then, in the United States. But what they did is they essentially evaluated over a period of 6 years. They heard testimony from 1,100 different scientists, researchers from 8 different countries, and found that that you and I basically here in America, 64% of our diet is comprised of fat and sugar. 64% of what we eat is fat and sugar. So dietarily, once again, we're not getting it done. But really what's important is they said that that 7 of the leading 10 causes of premature death in America were preventable with nutrition. So it's been estimated that 400,000 people a year die from bad diet. That's 500,000 Americans dying from bad diet. And those are direct statistics. We're not talking about all of the indirect statistics. So, yes, we are the land of plenty. We have the biggest, the best, the most of all potential. But we seem to be lacking in the cohesiveness and the capability to implement healthy preventive living. So, healing is our choice. The first thing you need to know is you have the power to make the difference. If 7 of the leading 10 causes of premature death are preventable based on diet alone, you're the doctor. You're the physician that needs to get busy, though. Because obviously up to this point in time, we're not getting that done. The second thing I wanted to talk about here is, besides healing is your choice, there is a healer within you. I said that it's really important to be aware of the fact that you have a level. You know, it's kind of like whenever people think of what their higher levels are, they're usually thinking business terms. I can make more money. Well, that's fine. That's good. But there's a little more to you than that. You know, I think when people are trying to reach exceptional levels, they might want to think in terms of the width, the breadth, and the depth of who they are as people. There's so much more to us than we ever get to exercise. I remember when I was a kid and they used to say that, you know, we use 11% of our brain or something like that. I think half the kids that I used to play with, that's a pretty, that's not a very round number. I think a lot of the kids that I played with used about 2%. But anyway, the point is that that we have a far greater potential within ourselves, spiritually, intellectually, but most importantly, I think I'd say consciously. I think we have far greater potential consciously to make differences. And the people over the years that I've learned that from, without question, have been patients that were terminally ill. Because when I started doing my nutrition work 25 years ago, I mean, I'd see people who were terminally ill, and I'd say, what are you doing here? I can't help you, you know. But somebody's got to try because they sent me home to die. Well, okay, what do? I got to think fast here. I'll never forget the faces of any one of them, but there was a 5-year-old girl that came to me 25 years ago from Plymouth who eventually succumbed to leukemia. But I'll never forget, as long as I live, her taking my hand and asking me not to let her die. I mean, those are the kind of experiences that when you have them repeatedly, you're going to dig down deeper. You're going to find your compassion. So when those experiences happened, yeah, I decided that I was going to do one of two things. I was either going to dig down deeper or I was going to go into the investment industry or any other industry. So I decided, obviously, to skip the investment industry. Anyway, to dig down deeper, to research harder, to find anything that I could, to network, to speak to as many practitioners around the world as I could, to develop relationships with them, to ask, to seek any way, shape, or form that I could, because these people needed somebody to help them. They needed some form of support. They deserved it. They were desperate for it, and there was no other place to get it. So, gradually, step by step and piece by piece, I would find information, and we'd implement this information. And I'd stumbled upon Warburg's work, and I stumbled upon alkalinity and all kinds of different stuff like this. And sooner or later, you start to really open up to the possibility that, wow, maybe there is something that I can help these people with. Maybe we can make a difference here. And then eventually that first person comes in and says, hey, I got great news. And you say, well, it couldn't have been us, because you immediately are taught to really cancel out or doubt yourself under those circumstances. I couldn't have possibly helped that person make that difference. So the first few times that happens, you're just happy that it happened, and you don't really care whether you took part in it or not. But then the question arises, well, wait a minute, I need to know if I made a difference here, because if I really did help make a difference, then there's a predictable path here where maybe I can actually help somebody else make a similar difference, and they certainly deserve that. So you study in that process, and you work with that alkalinity, like I said. And the more you develop skills in that regard, I think the easier it is for you to make predictable differences, and the numbers sort of speak for themselves after a while. But the thing that I wanted to impress here is that, how do these things work? They just work like this, I guess. Huh? And on one side, you've got alkaline. On one side, you've got acid. And on the acid side, you basically have fermentation. On the alkaline side, you have respiration. And obviously, what we're talking about here is the respiration of oxygen. And the key to a cut finger in the garden is no different than the key to healing yourself immunologically. Your cells need oxygen. If they don't, then they suffer from a process of anoxia. They become oxygen deprived at a cell level. Fermentation basically is, it uses up a lot of that oxygen. So it's kind of an either-or process. And the alkalization process is a process, as we say, that cultivates oxygen and really feeds the cells so that the cells become more active. Fermentation really breaks down the cells and removes the oxygen potential from those cells. So when we talk about foods, for example, you talk about alkalizing foods, basically fruits and veggies. Over here, you're talking about dead foods or processed foods, things like sugars and things like white flour. So the highly processed foods are the foods that are really using up your oxygen. I mean, ultimately, when you talk about what Warburg was saying, Warburg says that cancer really loves this environment right here. Cancer thrives in that environment. Doesn't thrive in this environment. So if we're really trying to create an environment that is more or less antagonistic to cancer, then we have to think about the alkalization process. And obviously, if you go to the next level, what you want to do, besides just eating your fruits and vegetables, is check your urine levels. Good Health Natural Foods, a lot of the places around here have the Fidrian .067 strips, which measure in tenths. Many of you know about that already. But the objective is to consistently check the urine levels first thing in the morning. The first morning's urine, between 6.4 and 6.8, is really representative of a blood pH. It's about 7.41. So you want to alkalize, you got to maintain a first morning's urine between 6.4 and 6.8. You do that, I tell you, that's literally a day where you're neutralizing your negative prospects as far as being a good host. The second thing you want to be thinking about, too, is you want to be thinking about using baking soda, because obviously bicarbonate, a lot of people worry about the sodium content. It's only about 35% sodium rich, so it's not quite as high in sodium as you think. But it's very definitely a buffer. It's a great alkalizer, and it's obviously pretty inexpensive. So the two simplest medicines you want to use to produce alkalinity, besides fruits and vegetables, would be liquid chlorophyll, and to use like 2 to 3 tablespoons of liquid chlorophyll a day, and approximately 1/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda before bed at night. And that's the best way to, obviously, along with diet, to guarantee that you're going to alkalize yourself. So the alkalinity process is something that you can steward, you can cultivate. You're in control of that process. Now, the other thing that I'd like to mention, too, is that there's a laboratory in Boston that's called ONCO, O-N-C-O. And ONCO Labs is really the brainchild of Dr. Samuel Bogich from Harvard. And back in the late 1970s, Dr. Bogich developed a test called the anti-malignant antibody screen. Now, he's a brilliant guy. One day he sat down and said, you know, everything that attacks the body produces a response to. It produces antibodies to viruses. It produces antibodies to mold and ragweed and all that kind of stuff. So nobody's ever discovered the antibody for cancer. Well, the body must produce an antibody to cancer. Well, he worked very hard and indeed found the antibody to cancer that the body produces. So he then developed a test to determine the antibody response to cancer, and it's called the AMAS test, A-M-A-S. It's an anti-malignant antibody screen. Now, it's capable of measuring the presence of cancer in the body, 99.9% accuracy. Okay, and that's based on 3,315 double blinds performed by SmithKline Laboratories, and it's FDA approved. Okay, so it measures the presence of cancer in your blood from a ratio of 0 to 700. So you know how they usually stage cancer, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is like staging cancer from 1 to 700. So it's very, very fine. It's very detailed at determining the level of cancer in one's blood. The reason I bring this up, it's extremely important, because if I tell people, look, you want to prevent cancer, well, that's a really noble effort, because we're losing 750,000 people every year. I always tell people, make sure you think in terms of, like when you go in the greenhouse, and you see every biological entity in that greenhouse, every plant, every flower, they've got tags. And those tags talk about the homeostasis potential, the caretaking requirements of those living plants. Well, theoretically, when you're in that greenhouse, you should be thinking of literally yourself as well. Everything that is biological, every biological subsystem in the universe, everything, including the sun itself, has a specific tag for its survival. All right? Cancer is a subsystem. It's a biological entity, and therefore has requirements. So as big as cancer is in most people's minds, it'll never be bigger than the laws of biology that it has to abide by. So cancer has something in common with you. It has to eat, and it has to have a favorable environment. That puts you on a level playing field. Okay? When you're thinking in those terms, it's no longer as big as it once was in your mind. All right, so when you think about cancer and you've got the leadership of a Nobel Prize winner that tells you that cancer wants things this way, not this way, well, now you got a strategy. And you got a strategy from somebody who is very learned and very worth taking strategic support from. So if I ask somebody like you to, okay, look at you get your urine strips, you check your first morning's urine, you eat properly, you do more fruits and veggies, cut down on the junk food except for weekends or whatever, and make sure you're using your alkalizing liquid chlorophyll, you're using your baking soda, doing all the right stuff, all right? You're doing all the right stuff. But I don't want you to just take my word for it. You shouldn't be shooting in the dark when you're playing for such important potentials here. Okay, this is life and death. So you need to know where you're at. You need a scoreboard. Well, that's what the AMAS test is, okay? It's 99.9% accurate, as I said. It's about a $180 test. $180. So my way of thinking, this is just me, when people go for medical exams, wouldn't it be a great idea to implement a lousy $180 test that's 99.9% accurate? Why would we do that, though? I can't imagine why we do something that silly. Anyway, you have the ability to do that. If you can ask your physician, chances are better than good that your physician will not have heard of this test, because it's only been around since the 1970s. At any rate, you can ask your physician for an AMAS test, and they can requisition that, and you can have that done. And again, from the way it's scored is if you're under 100, we talked about the ratio from 1 to 700. If you're under 100, you've got a normal reading. Obviously, the lower, the better. So if you have a 1, well, that's great. If you're theoretically between 1 and 25, that's about as low as you could ever expect. But nonetheless, if you're 99 or lower, you're in good shape. But again, for $180, I'd have one. If I was worried about it, I'd do it quarterly or twice a year or something like that. And indeed, you should feel free to do that. And it will directly correspond with your pH. That's the beauty of this stuff. When people start off and they have their baselines, their urinary baselines, and they're very acid, okay, they're 5.0. That's as acid as you get. It's bad news. You're 5.0, but you want to see what happens with your AMAS test, it's going to be on the high side. So the lower your pH, or the more acid you are, the higher your AMAS test. But what we see happen when people alkalize themselves and their pH comes up, their anti-malignant antibody screen comes down. So here's the most important thing I'm going to tell you about cancer all night. Cancer is not static. It's fluid. It's like you and I. It has good days and it has bad days. Most people think of it as a monolithic, one-dimensional entity. You either have it or you don't have it. I don't see it that way. I see it as you have something that you can change based on your strategic behaviors. If you're conscious about it, if you have a plan, if you're determined, if you're working it, if you're testing yourself with regularity, you're in power. But the way we do it right now is you don't know any of this stuff, and it happens or it doesn't happen. You have it or you don't have it, and if you do, you're done. Because when I watch people come in my office after they've been diagnosed, it's like they have a date with the hangman. It's all done. Oh, I have it. It's either I do or I don't. And when you have it, you're just getting started in my book. Because most people want to be thinking in terms of preventing it, but they forestall getting started. They postpone it, okay? And then they're diagnosed, and then it's too late to get started because they've got the death sentence. But in reality, we've got to start teaching people differently about cancer. We have to start educating people differently about their potentials for empowerment. We have to spread out just a little bit of the information. And furthermore, I think it's really a better idea that we remove it from the shadows, that we bring it up front, and let's have some dialogue, let's have some debate, and let's do it for the good of the general public. But right now, you're out of the loop, and you're the one that most needs to be in the loop. So when I talk about you being the doctor and the healer is within you, I'm not just saying those words rhetorically. I'm saying those words literally. And I watched person after person over 25 years who take the information, dedicate themselves to the information, and impose their recoveries. People who had no business recovering according to what was said, but they did. A lot of people beat it. A lot of people beat it. And one of these days we'll have a forum where we can let you listen to their story and hear what they have to say about it. And I would love to be able to present that kind of forum because they have so much to share and so much to vivify us with. Because their stories are stories of human triumph. Their stories are stories that you don't hear enough. You hear so much of the other side of it. You know, the destitution, the desperation, the negativity. Well, it's not all about that. So we're a germ of something that wants to grow and expand, and we're a germ of something that we're ready for in this culture, I believe. And I'm very devoted to talking more about it because I know that I can't do what I've been doing for 25 more years, and I have a responsibility to share some of that information before I leave. So 25 years is a long time, and I'm still doing the work, but I feel like the next journey for me is to expand in that information and let people really decide for themselves, you know, to take a look at what I've seen and to hear it right from the people that have had those experiences. But they're truly remarkable experiences on all counts. And, you know, when we talk about food being medicine, again, there is so much to that process. It's not simply that we're talking about it from the standpoint. I know somebody not too long ago at Tom Tam's office said, I think I know why Mark's people get better. He said, I think that they like him so much they're afraid to let him down. I think there's a little more to it than that. Researchers have isolated compounds from the vegetable broccoli that they believe may help or slow the progress of bladder cancer. The current work builds on a major study conducted 6 years ago by Harvard and Ohio State universities that found that men who ate 2 or more half-cup servings of broccoli per week had a 44% lower incidence of bladder cancer compared to men who ate less than 1 serving each week. We're starting to look at which compounds in the broccoli could inhibit or decrease the growth of cancer cells, said Stephen Schwartz, a co-author of a professor of food science and technology at Ohio State University. There's sulforaphane, there's glucosinates, there's a number of different things in broccoli that have already been identified with repeatedly. The other amazing thing about the laboratory world and the study world regarding cancer and all this stuff is that they don't even really speak to each other that much. They get locked into the zone in the lab, and it's just kind of like between here and going home and eating. You know, because I talk to lab people and I say, hey, you know, there's other studies similar to your studies. Do you know about those? No, really, no kidding. I mean, there's so many people out there that are doing remarkable nutritional research right now, especially with regards to cancer and heart disease. But again, they're isolating the compounds, the phytonutrient compounds in food. So we used to say, well, look, food is medicine. Yeah, it sounds like a novel concept. It must be the vitamins. No, it's not the vitamins. There's phytonutrients that are remarkably powerful in there. I interviewed Dr. Daniel Nixon, Dr. Gary Stoner, people from Ohio State University and from the University of South Carolina, the Hollings Cancer Research Institute. The equivalent, they've done raspberry studies, and they've been studying something called ellagic acid. You know the little seeds in the raspberries? Those little tiny seeds that everybody sort of ignores, or they kind of clean them out of their teeth, and that's about the only thing they think about them. But those little seeds in those raspberries, the equivalent of 3/4 of a cup of raspberries in the studies being done, co-joint studies at Ohio State and University of South Carolina, 3/4 of a cup of raspberries have the ability to cause cancer cell death, to kill cancer cells. You know how long it took? 72 hours. How many people in this room ever heard of that study? Show of hands. All right, but the point is that if I were to ask you how many people feel that you'd like to have information, raise your hands. I mean, who wouldn't? See, what is the deal here? There's a market for that information, yet you can't get it. It's crazy because it's life and death information. It's information listen, cancer touches, unfortunately these days, the lives of all of us. Because nobody in here, not one person in this room, hasn't been affected by cancer in some way. If you see that I have, or people like me have presentations out there regarding this kind of stuff, if it's on television, if it's on radio, and if the word gets out, you need to tell 2 people. You know the old Joe Namath hair commercial? And they need to tell 2 people, and they need to tell 2 people, because we've got to get as many people to respond to that stuff as we possibly can. There is another side to this whole story, and that story needs to be told, desperately needs to be told. All right, just before we take a little quick breather, I'm going to do a couple things here regarding the second half of the presentation, because we're going to do a lot of muscle testing, and we're going to pick on you and get you up here and tug on your arms a little bit. But I want to talk just a little bit real quickly. I want to intro that. You know, the idea that you and I have nervous systems, you know that because you've been on the Southeast Expressway before. But we have nervous systems that are very reactive and very responsive to virtually everything. Interestingly enough, consciousness, as I said earlier, never takes a vacation. You and I are constantly, ever presently aware of virtually everything. But again, because self has been minimized, we're not used to thinking of ourselves as having that potential to be constantly aware, but we are constantly aware. And the idea that we have the ability to sense virtually everything and anything and have an opinion about it. Our body has an opinion about it because your nervous system is constantly reactive to virtually everything. And at a physical level, it alters muscle response. So I always say you've got 72,000 nerve endings running through virtually every muscle in your body. And we know through science that you change those reactions all the time. They get stronger and weaker, weaker and stronger, stronger and weaker all day long. Example, if you hear that somebody that you love very much is coming to visit, you get stronger. You hear that somebody is, coming to visit you that owes you $20,000 and doesn't have it, you get weaker. Or if you're going for your favorite meal with somebody that you love, you're all charged up. And if you're starving and there's nothing in the refrigerator, your chi goes way down. So you're constantly changing your energy in terms of the stimuli that's around you. So your muscles really are a really viable medium for your nervous system's response. So as you know, there are very different plus and minus factors that affect your muscles. So I've 20 years ago said, well, if the nervous system really reacts that way through the muscle response, then why don't people implement it for diet and nutrition? It's crazy that they don't, or for virtually anything that they want. But I start from the premise nutritionally that you want to make good decisions about diet and nutrition. The healer is within, the choice to heal is yours. That's really important, fundamental stuff. We all know that. But the other part of it that you've got to remind yourself of is one-size-fits-all diets are very unfitting. They don't make any sense. Not for you, the consumer. They certainly make great sense for Dr. Atkins' empire. But the idea that one-size-fits-all dieting is futile and stupid because we're all so unique biochemically and so sensitive, that we've got to have a better approach or a better way to tap into the options. Well, once again, I am not other-directed. I think we need to be more self-directed. So I don't want to tell you that there's somebody with a magical idea of how to put you on your unique diet out there. I'd rather tell you that you have the ability to do that. But you just don't know that and you don't trust in that. So hopefully by the time we finish this next sequence tonight, you'll have better trust in that. Joe, why don't you come up for a second? So raise up, make a fist there, keep the elbow straight, resist good and strong. Good and strong. All right. What we're going to do here is I'm just going to basically give Joe some images, all right? And let's just kind of work right off the cuff here. Raise up good and strong and resist. Again, his nervous system is going to react literally to virtually all the stimuli that we run by him right now. So if I say, Joe, the temperature out there tonight is 15 degrees and it's windy. And it's going down to 8. But can you imagine yourself right now on a balmy beach somewhere where it's about 75 and there's a gentle breeze and you don't have a care in the world and you don't have to go to work because you just won the lottery and Joe's going to tighten right up for us. All right, so obviously there are plus and minuses here. There's some really wonderful books. There's great studies that have been done on this stuff. We have a lot of that stuff on our website. There's a great book called Power versus Force that talks about this too, Raise Up Good and Strong. All right, let's kind of run through some of these options. I'm just going to give him some notions about food here just for a second or two. So if I say apples and blueberries and raspberries and I say blackberries, and if I say peaches, pears, plums, what about if I say oranges, grapefruit, lemons, raise up again, lemons, okay, once more, lemons, how about if I say tomatoes, oops, okay. So the idea that there were one or two things there that he didn't respond positively to. Here's the bottom line. Keep this really simple. We don't want to get too complicated with this. We know scientifically that you react to virtually everything through your nervous system. Your nervous system intercepts and courses through all your muscles. So you're going to have this happen constantly all day long. This happens to you virtually endlessly, even while you sleep. You may notice sometimes that when you're having dreams at night, resist good and strong, even though it's not real, if you're falling off a cliff in a dream, Joe's going to get weak. So yes, that's a real elevated heart rate. That's very real that happens. That's real perspiration, even though in the dream you're not really, you're not living through the experience of the trauma in the dream. Your body is still living through the process as if it really were. So it doesn't distinguish the difference. So that energy never makes it to the prefrontal cortex. It keeps bouncing back and forth from the amygdala to the hippocampus. Bang, 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 like ping pong. So if there's something that you feel negative about, we know you're going to have a reaction or response to it. We know it's going to be electrically determinable through these little tests. So it's not very complicated, but here's what I'd tell you. We know the reactions happen, so what do we want to do about that? Okay, do we want to just say, nah, okay, it happens, forget about it? Well, you could do that. Or you could say, well, it happens, but we could do it at a cocktail party and just kind of have fun with it. Okay, you can do that too. Well, I decided 25 years ago to trust it, because my sense is that you should be trusting in yourself a lot better, and if you get the right attitude and the right frame of consciousness around the intention here, then you can do a lot more with it than you might think. So we could do something as simple as we just did, or we can actually get a little bit more detail with Joe, and I can say, okay, for breakfast, Joe will have protein. Joe will have low-starch carbohydrates. Joe will have high-starch carbohydrates. Okay, Joe will have a high-starch carbohydrate at breakfast? No, he won't. At lunch, Joe will have protein. Joe will have low-starch carb. Joe will have high-starch carb. He could at lunch, but if he had a high-starch carb at breakfast, that would happen. Okay, how much protein should he have at breakfast? 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 4 ounce, 5. Okay, so my bottom line is this. It's not like we haven't discovered that you will react to everything. I told you, consciousness doesn't take a vacation. Whether you're sleeping or not, you have an opinion, biologically, neurologically, about everything. Absolutely everything. Everybody in this room will react and respond to virtually every stimuli imaginable. So nobody's any different than Joe. But your responses are going to be uniquely different, person by person. So the fact that that is a reality, and the fact that we know that that happens, and yes, there are studies, but I've done this 25 years empirically, subjectively, and the bottom line of it is you need to think in terms of your intention and your trust in the process, because the process is all about one person, and it's you. So if we sort of string together some of the elements that we've talked about thus far, you're the healer within. It's a choice that you can make. You can decide to focus an intention about it. You can get better at it. You can really determine whether or not these answers are within you and what they seem to suggest. Then you've got to work through the process of discernment and decide what it really means for you. But it's all about your intention. It's all about the way you ask. It's all about what you're looking for. And it really starts with you believing in yourself and having trust in your ability to derive answers. Resist good and strong. All right. What if we said Joe should exercise 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 weeks, 5, 6, 5 days a week's enough, Joe? 1, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. How about 6 days a week? Never going to happen. Joe's a personal trainer. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, a little hand for Joe. So we do see that the body is responsive, and we go back to the idea of implementing nutrition. Why go with one-size-fits-all dieting when you neurologically are that sensitive and that willing to share that information with yourself? So when I wrote the Wu Wei, the very first book that I wrote, I was really, really hell-bent on trying to get people to do the work. So I sort of taught in that book the muscle testing process as best I could, hoping that people would implement some of these things and really get busy doing their own stuff and trying to find out what they could eat, what they couldn't eat, and sort of, make my work more obsolete so that I could go back to that investment. No, never mind. So obviously, we have the opportunity to really make hay with some of this testing. Now, we're gonna basically get into doing some other work with this that's pretty interesting. I'm going to show you. There's 7 different envelopes that I have here. Each one has a different picture in it. They're closed envelopes. They all have different pictures in it. And I'm going to have people basically hold these pictures, and we're going to muscle test them while they're holding these pictures to their heart. And then after you see the response, we're going to open the pictures. The reason for these exercises is because I want you to know how much you know that you don't know about. All right. We're also going to work through some phrases here, too, some words There's a series of positive and negative words, and I'm going to kind of work neurologically through some of that response as well. These two gals over here, we were having a conversation earlier, and I'm sorry, your name is?
Lois also.
All right, two Loises, okay. Anyway, Lois was talking, just come on up here just for a second. Lois was talking about having a parathyroid condition. You can leave your bag over there. We're not going far.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. And bottom line of it is that the parathyroid is on either side of the thyroid, which is right here. Parathyroid is here on the right and left. They were talking about removing the parathyroid. I said, well, I don't think the problem originates in the parathyroid. The problem originates in the adrenal glands, because the parathyroid really produces a lot of thyrocalcitonin, which means that it produces a lot of calcium receptors. So it produces all these little catcher's mitts for calcium, and it tries to gobble up as much calcium as possible. It will also go into bone banks and withdraw calcium. Now, the purpose of doing that is the body's only going to do that to alkalize itself under emergency scenarios. So when you've been really, really in a sympathetic dominant mode, or really high adrenal stress for a long, long time, and we had a conversation, she said she had a lot of stress early on in life. And then my second question is, are you unusually sensitive? Yeah, she's real sensitive. I said, that's a bad combination. You take sensitivity in this stressful world, that's pretty tough stuff. Anyway, long story short is your adrenal glands go into a fight or flight mode. They produce 45 different hormones that really are very acidifying. They're very acidifying. Now, think about it. Why does the adrenal gland system do that? Very simply, it's looking to simply make availability to energy. In other words, as I always use the example, if we're having a quiet time in here this evening and we're enjoying ourselves, and our adrenal glands are not particularly active or relaxed, and suddenly some emergency comes up and we all have to file out of the building really quickly, well, that's a sure sign that your adrenal glands are going to move into a really active sympathetic mode. Well, they're going to produce 45 different hormones for the purpose of mobilizing you, because if you're not ready yet to break down the dinner that you might have just had a little while ago for usable energy, but there's an emergency and you need it now, well, your adrenal glands are going to force a lot of acidity in the body to break it down, a lot of hydrochloric acid, make it available, okay, so that you can run for your life if you have to. That's the way the body is designed. So you really have two systems. You have the emergency system and the efficiency system. And the emergency system produces a lot of acidity because it needs to mobilize resources. The efficiency system is nice and alkaline and takes its time and is very efficient. So in this case, what I'd say is the parathyroids on either side, some people have 2, some have 3, and some even have 4. They're little stony glands on the outside of the thyroid, and they produce really high concentrations of thyrocalcitonin, this receptor that rushes through the blood system and finds ways to concentrate as much calcium as possible. So it's really it's on the hunt for calcium at all times, because calcium is an alkalizer. So that's the body's way of alkalizing itself in emergency scenarios. So let's go back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier. Let's say somebody... Okay. No, I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to have some... If you have a lot of stress, you're very sensitive, you're in a sympathetic dominant mode, and your adrenal glands are going full tilt, eventually that acidity has got to be held in check. So your body will push all these emergency buttons, overactivate these calcium receptors in the parathyroid so that it can try to alkalize and buffer itself. Perfect system, works great, but it was only designed to work short periods of time. Like when there's a wolf in the woods and you were chased up a tree, but 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, you're supposed to go right back into your normal alkaline state. We, unfortunately, are living 24/7, 365 in these stress states. So that produces error. So too much calcium in the body, as we were saying earlier, can produce kidney stones. Renal calculi is calcium. Can produce gallstones. Can produce arterial plaques made of calcium. It's a calcium called hydroxyapatite. And it's the kind of calcium that is very, very dense. So if you build up these calciums, you can create all kinds of problems. But again, where did it start? It didn't start in the parathyroid, so they could surgically remove her parathyroid, so they're not doing that anymore. The body still needs to express itself through this problem. the body will always try to compensate biochemically. I mean, this is a perfectly natural unit here. So this thing is always looking to change in accordance to the needs and the emergencies. So you remove these, that's not going to change it. It's still going to happen. Now you've given it something else to have to respond to. Her muscles are not strong enough to use, so what we're going to do is something called surrogate or proxy. So Dottie is going to help her out. We're going to turn you guys just a little bit this way. Dottie's arms coming up like that, make a fist. Now, the only reason we're doing this right now, I'm going to work with her pressure points, the adrenal pressure points for the adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. Now, the acupuncture points for those that we're going to use are in the back and right in the shoulders here, which is actually LI19 for those of you keeping score. So the bottom line of this is we're going to use a surrogate because she's too sensitive. Well, can you do that? Yes. How and why? We all have electrical systems, and all we're doing here is using somebody else's electrical system. The minute she takes her arm down, we're not co-joined here. We're not testing you anymore. We're testing Dottie. So back up again, right there, resist. So she's got a good strong bias muscle. I'm going to come right to the adrenals here and just tap like that. All right, I'm going to go to the cortex right here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so both of those areas are really weak. I would say the medulla is a lot weaker than the cortex. Once more again, like that. All right, so you can use your neural electrical response for a variety of diagnostic means. Thank you very much. So again, I think the body is always looking to express itself, and the most important thing, she asked her, what should I do? You have a choice as to whether or not you open yourself up to yourself. Okay? You have a choice as to whether or not you learn to invest in your awarenesses, in your capabilities, whether or not you can tap into your awarenesses, your neurological and electrical awarenesses that are going off and on all day long. You don't have to do this. Don't put the pressure on yourself. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You can just kind of have fun with this thing initially. We're not asking people to do brain surgery with a butter knife here. So you can have fun with this, and you can kind of just sort of start engaging yourself in the process and just sort of see how you evolve, how you expand, and how you improve with regards to your ability to kind of do this stuff. But I think that people like Lois deserve another perspective on this anyway, so I wanted to take a minute to do that. Why don't you come on back up here? All right. I'm going to basically just feed you some information here. Resist good and strong. Tighten right up for me. Now, again, in power versus force, there's a reference to positive and negative terms. So when you think about whether or not your thoughts, your words, your expressions, the things you say, the things you do, are being observed by your consciousness, or being absorbed by your consciousness, and are ultimately affecting you energetically with regards to healthy or unhealthy, you better believe it. Like I said, consciousness does not take, God bless you, does not take any vacations. So let's just kind of work with this for a minute. Raise up. We've got a list of positive and negative, so why don't we just start with those two words? How about positive and how about the word negative? Okay? Let's run through some more of these. These have all been scored out in the in Hawkins' book, too. Abundant, excessive, being, having, devoted, possessive, encouraging, promoting, grateful, indebted, honest, legal, joyful, pleasurable, powerful, forceful, privileged, entitled, spiritual. All right, if anybody's interested in seeing the complete positive and negative references, the book that I talked about, Power versus Force, has 2 pages of all those references. So, again, every time that you think of anything, anytime a word comes out of your mouth, every time you have a dream, every time you conceptualize anything within the field of your consciousness, it doesn't matter what it is, you're being affected by it. If I'm interested in myself, I think, again, as a culture, right off the giddy up, we're sort of programmed to pay attention to other, respond to other, be addicted to other. Other becomes the focus of our whole existence. Well, that sounds like a really noble concept, but it's not. I mean, ultimately, you have to be included in a balance within the context of self versus other. And I think that, generally speaking, we're sort of very much self-contented in this culture. And I think that we need, the first healing is our own self-contempt, to heal from our own self-contempt. You know, in other words, we'll ask people from time to time, you know, well, you're here, but do you really feel deserving of recovery? Believe it or not, that's a huge question. You know, because there's something that brings somebody to the healer, to the doctor, to the physician. We're not sure what all the time, and I think it's important to start the discussion right there and to really try to tap into whether or not they're there to be healed, prove you wrong. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people go to a physician. You know, so I think that ultimately, the more you develop a sense of conscious awareness, interest, care, love, compassion, forgiveness within the realm of self, and kind of get the self equation caught up to the other equation, then you have far less addiction, you have far less depression, far less anxiety, that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, that's a starting point. And I think the more that you strive to balance out that equation, that the more inclined you are to not need to do the muscle testing. You know, you'll have, I think, a greater awareness and a greater conscious reserve of connection that you'll be able to access. So anyway. What I want to do next is I want to kind of do the envelope thing here just for a few seconds. All right. What's your name?
Lorette.
All right. Lorette is going to help us out. And again, as we talked about earlier, we have a series of envelopes here, and they're hermetically sealed on Funk and Wangel's port. No, I'm just kidding. All right. I'm going to have you just hold that right there. And I'm going to have you raise up, and let's good strong arm. Okay. And resist. All right. All right. And let's actually have you just hold that one for us. That was relatively positive, was it not? All right, let's just have you hold that real close there. And resist. One more time. Okay, what happens there is she's rather unplugged. All right, I'm going to ask you to open that one.
Okay.
It's Adolf Hitler. All right, want to open that one for us? Mother Teresa. Tell everybody your name. Hope. Okay. All right, Hope, we're going to have you do the same thing. And let's actually have you just hold that close. Okay? And you don't have to think about anything here. Okay, I just want you to think about this thing being real close to you here and resist. Wonderful. Okay. One more time here. Resist good and strong. Okay. And obviously that was pretty strong, yes? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to hand you you're the positive support system here this evening. Okay, let's go to this one, and let's hold that one up. Okay. Up like so, and raise up and resist good and strong. Make a fist. And resist. One more time. Resist. Okay. Up again. Let's go up higher here. Okay. Mm-hmm. That was like, I didn't even do that one. That one sort of happened by itself. All right, let's have you open that. No, it's not scary. What? Did you hear what she said?
I have 6 kids.
Chaos does not want to be your life, or you don't want chaos in your life. And obviously the first one was order. All right. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Let's get one more. Yeah, come on up. Now this gets really interesting because not only do you not have to know what you're holding close to you, but after you open it, you don't even have to logically or intelligibly know what it is. And that's what we're going to do on this one. All right, I'm sorry, your name?
Kelly.
Kelly, unless Kelly is a research biologist, then. All right, let's have you, let's do these in, let's see, let's do this one first. Okay, raise up. Actually, let's just check your resistance here first. Let's make sure. Good and strong, make a fist and resist. Tighten right up Excellent. All right, let's have you hold that. And one more time. Okay. All right, you can open that one up. That is a woman smoking methamphetamine. Okay. And let's go to this one. And raise up. And resist. And resist. And resist. Nice and tight. That's it. Okay. Great resistance there. Now you can open that one up. That's all right. Now, you don't know. Well, that's what. Those are lymphocytes. They keep you alive. But the interesting point about that is like I said, not only did she not know what was in the envelope, but after she opened it, she still didn't know what was in the envelope. But the point is that that is a very positive reference. Like we said earlier, the subconscious mind doesn't know it. The conscious mind gets little clues of things and sort of has intuitive capability and sense perception. The quantum mind or the superconscious mind is a whole other realm. That's a whole different thing altogether. The quantum mind already knows, the information's already in there. Thank you very much. If you study any of Rupert Sheldrake's work, Rupert Sheldrake talks a great deal about non-local mind, morphic resonance. Fascinating studies that they did. Anthropologists were actually looking at different data that comes from ancient cultures. And these primitive cultures were actually practicing these absolutely bizarre ceremonial rites. And in these rituals, they would actually move in certain ways, like they'd go 4 transits to the left, 3 transits to the right, hop on a left leg, hop on a right leg, etc. Well, they were in one part of the planet. And these anthropologists would actually find and study the exact same rituals to a T from ancients from another part of the planet. That what they did is they attempted to kind of try to date them and said that they were dated from almost identically the same time. So these people were performing these very detailed rituals from different parts of the planet at exactly the same time. So when we talk about what we just did here, her not knowing what that is, it's spoken about, it's written about often, and for example, in the Power versus Force book, it's written about, and they've done a lot of studies on what we just did here. And they determined that there is a level of consciousness or superconsciousness that people have in the mind that is usually not tapped. We're usually thinking in terms of our brain, doing mathematical logic, doing deductive reasoning, et cetera, but we have a right hemisphere, and when you integrate the two together, you have capabilities that are far more limitless than we've ever explored. So we're dealing in the realm of quantum mind right now. But again, the point that I'm trying to make here is it comes back to the higher potential of mind that we haven't tapped, that we're not looking into, and that up until recent years we didn't even know existed. So we sort of backed our way into it because a lot of experiments in some of these areas would then lead people to question, well, how is this happening? There's a wonderful book written by Dr. Larry Dossey, orthopedic surgeon, who wrote a book called Reinventing Medicine. And in Reinventing Medicine, he has hundreds of detailed studies that are being done around the world in non-locality like that, the very thing we just did. People not knowing that they knew. And the probabilities are broken down in each one of these study samples, and they're like 5 million to 1, 1 million to 1, 500,000 to 1. They're extremely high. So, we're sort of backing our way into the awareness of what our wisdom is. We're not talking about knowledge. We're not talking about learnedness. We're talking about innate wisdom. We're talking about sense perception. We're talking about different qualities that each of us have that we're, up to this point in time, very tuned out in. We're not really in touch with these things. We don't exercise them. We don't discuss these potentials. We're sort of living in a vacuum, I guess I'd say. We're living in the box. We think that all there is what I see. Well, the quantum world says that it's out there, and it means virtually everything and anything.
And there's a way to grasp
And there's a way to grasp it, and there's a way to interplay with it, there's a way to reciprocate with it. But it starts with, opening ourselves up to the fact that we are elements in that world. We're not separate from it, we're part of that. So of all the marvelous, miraculous quantum stuff that's out there in the universe right now, we're not separate from that. We're not contemplating it from a separate place. We're no longer the astronomers who are looking out into the stratosphere. We are part of the universe. So I think that the idea that we begin by appreciating that we are so much more than we're accustomed to thinking of ourselves as. And I think I often say, to a great extent, the seminars that I do and the presentations, whether I'm with you one-on-one or whether we're in a room with a lot of people, the whole focus is the absolute miracle of you, the miracle of us, the miracle of our capabilities that are untapped. So I think that, there's a whole lot of room to fall in love with self in a very spiritual sort of way, in a very awareness-driven, conscious-driven manner. And there's a lot of excitement sitting in this room here right now that hasn't yet reached its full fruition. So there's a remarkable potentiation that each one of us, I think, needs to have tweaked and excited. So that's really the core and the essence of where healing is. Like I said earlier, you're the doctor. You have the power to make the decisions here. You're the healer. You're the person that can actually evolve to a far more expansive level of potential. But you have to begin by appreciating yourself and really caring to do that, really affirming that process. Okay, I have one more. This is my favorite little thing to do. I just have one more person. Yeah, why don't you come on? Tell everybody your name.
Joan.
All right, Joan, raise up and resist good and strong. And Joan is just going to hold that right there. And we're going to kind of fool around with this one for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find an area, a little acupuncture zone that might be a little sensitive, a little deficient, a little weak here for a second here. So we're going to pick on Joan, resist good and strong. I'm going to go out here to adrenal, thyroid, parathyroid, heart, bile duct, liver, gallbladder. Raise up again. All right, that little gallbladder zone there is a little sensitive, right? All right. All right, I'm going to have you hold that right there. Okay, and resist. And resist good and strong. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A little stronger than when we don't have that picture here, I believe. Okay, let's open that up. It's my favorite picture. He's probably about 5 years old, and he's got a Superman costume on. And he's really feeling it, So, yeah, what does that say? What does that mean? What do you think it means? Did you ever really look at a kid with a loving sense and just kind of feel what they're all about, what their energy is about? How about all of us when we were kids and we weren't being disappointed by adults, and we weren't being disappointed by the planet we live on, and we were allowed to imagine and dream and daydream, and the universe was where we lived, not the world? That's what he was right there. There is no greater power in the universe than that. So when a kid has that, let him keep it. Thank you very much. Remember that there's still a kid in you that's dying to live that way. We talk about the child within, and we talk about the whole process of growing up. And I say we grow up chronologically, but back to what we say about the subconscious. The subconscious is the place in us where the child in us that's still disappointed, hurt, wounded, and trying to find how to get back into that universal kind of frame of mind and out of this really negativistic world that's suddenly putting all these heavy sort of disappointments on them. I think that energy is still sort of the archive of our subconscious. We all have that. We're all still carrying that. But again, designed not to be a negative experience, designed to bring about tension that's designed to be sacred. Because moving up into the conscious and just observing life and being more aware of who we are, what our capabilities, what our limitless potentials are, the way the universe is really set up, the way, forget the world for a minute and think about the universe. And think about if this world were more in touch with the fact that it was a part of the universe and everybody in it felt that way. I think that, you're moving more into your conscious potential. And then your super conscious potential is that place where that kid finally is at peace. And that kid's confident. That kid's free to be universally engaged and to have as much fun and enjoyment as possible. So that's what that picture is. But interestingly enough, as a pure form of energy, we had a sensitive gallbladder area that suddenly wasn't so sensitive. So there's a wonderful, wonderful, last year at this time, I was actually in California doing some seminar work out there. And it was remarkable. I was like driving between Palm Springs and Los Angeles. And I heard an interview with a doctor who was actually doing research on the smile. Okay? And Master Mantak Chia, who is a Taoist master and a healer and a teacher, teaches a great deal about the inner smile. And one of the ancient healing modalities that he's constantly espousing to, it's 3,000 years old, but they claim you can heal virtually anything with it. And all you're doing is literally smiling into your organs. Okay? So for 3,000 years, when people in the province that he thrived in as a young man were growing up, they were told that when you have a bellyache, you smile into your belly. You have a headache, you smile into your head. And just literally envision a smile, just projecting a smile into that place, or into that little sensitive gallbladder area, a smile into that place. Because a smile is representative of a very, very powerful energy, a very powerful healing energy, much the way that picture of that little boy was. So purely as energy, and to become more energy aware, more energy conscious again, that subtle things make big differences. And if I wasn't feeling well, if I had a headache or if I was tired or something and I was driving down the street, and if I saw a beautiful little boy like that playing in a playground, I would literally drink him up. And I would take that beautiful energy that he was sharing, whether anybody's aware of what he's sharing or not is the question. There's a whole pharmacy out there. There are beautiful stars. There's beautiful trees. There's a beautiful ocean we're fortunate to have nearby with magnificent waves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's wonderful people. There's smiles all over the place. And there's great kids out there that you can drink up. So I think the objective is, and we've read the studies even about a lot of the hypertension hospital studies when they bring small pets in. They bring cats in and they bring dogs in, and both systolic and diastolic go down. There's all kinds of great studies about that. But that's really what it's about. It's about willingness to say yes to energy in all of its subtle forms, because that is really where the universe is opening itself to itself. So, and by the same token, when you think about the people that you live with, the people that you're hanging with, and the opportunities that you have to project that same kind of energy to those people, once again, it's going to be difficult at first. A, you're going to forget about it. B, you're going to minimize it because you've been programmed to do that. You've been programmed to minimize yourself, your life, to not think that you have a purpose, to think that your life is chaos and not order. But the objective is that each and every person in here is no different than, it's like Deepak talks about the molecule. If you could remove one single molecule from the universe, the entire universe would collapse. Okay? Theoretical physics tells us that every molecule is purposeful and in the right place. Well, if that's true about theoretical physics and molecules, then you and I certainly have no different a fate and no different a reference. So each one of us had a purpose, a reason for being here. Every single one of us, no matter where your subconscious mind, your hurt self takes you, no matter what kind of convincing it does, no matter what kind of distracting it does, be that as it may, bottom line of it is your superconscious is always observing and waiting for you to connect with it, climb that ladder, move into that place of observation in your life process, and be aware of the fact that you have very real purpose, very important purpose, very real missions in life that are waiting for you. And all you have to do is say yes to you. Of course, that's probably the most difficult thing for us to do. So I'm encouraging each person in here to start saying yes to you. And if you learn nothing tonight but that, then I will have accomplished my purpose. Thank you very much.